So today on the Scenic podcast, I am absolutely excited to be joined by Kaileen. We met actually on Emma Natcher's School of Entrepreneurship. So we immediately knew we're like-minded people, and I'm super excited to have her here. Kaileen, give us a bit of an idea of who you are. Like, walk us through your story. What were your pivotal crossroads and big moments?
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited for this conversation. And goodness gracious, that is always just such a question that leaves you at the edge of the cliff of like, where am I going to go and what's going to come through today? But at this moment, I am an intuition coach and a mom of three. I also have a podcast called Celebrate, Cultivate. And these days, the thing I do for work is spend time supporting women, helping them connect to their inner voice, their intuition. So, unlike traditional coaching out there, which is wonderful, and if that resonates for you, I'm so happy. Unlike that, where the coach is kind of guiding the individual on what the coach thinks or what research shows and XYZ experts, my work is really focused on helping people tune into what is true to them and hearing their inner voice inside of them. And that is something I think we all have innately within us when we arrive here on
Mm.
planet Earth. And then life happens and situations occur, and we learn to look at experts and learn from teachers and coaches. And all of that is wonderful because there's so much to learn out there. But on top of that, we kind of pile this distrust for intuition and this separation from the fact that you do know what's best and right for you and that you do have your best interest at heart and that you can trust yourself. So I came to this work after the birth of my second child when I had decided my whole life I always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. That was my life goal.
Mhm.
And I had two and under, had reached the pinnacle of my goal and thought,
Yeah,
you know
like
what?
you're a warrior. That's yeah. 202 is
It was, it was amazing. And it was also a lot different than what I expected.
mm,
And it was different than I had imagined. And more importantly, I was a different mom than I had dreamt that I would be. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it was this very big, pivotal crossroads kind of moment where I knew I wanted to do something different with my time. And the way to finding that and trusting myself was through my intuition.
mm.
And I originally started a business building websites for entrepreneurs on Squarespace because I had had a blog since 2009 and I had built many websites, sheer,
Mm.
experience, no study, like building graphics on PowerPoint and whatnot and exporting them to JPEGs.
That was before we had Canva, so thank
Yeah,
God for Canva.
I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, between Canva, as I pronounce it, and
Yeah, that's
and
true.
Squarespace, Squarespace. Like
Mm.
I built my sites on WordPress and then I moved a
I
site
used to
from WordPress
too.
to yeah,
Same,
crazy. So
same.
different. So anyways, I did that for a while and what I came around to discovering is that I was coaching a lot of my entrepreneurs on I can build you a pretty website. Like I can definitely do that, but it's not going to give you what you want until it's in alignment with you, which I know is so much of what you
Yes,
teach.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And I had famously told a friend of mine who was a coach at the time, there's no way I'll be a coach. I don't want to be a coach. And most of the reason for that was that I didn't necessarily want to talk about people's troubles. And everybody's truth is
Mm,
important to discuss, but I don't like to dwell in that too much. And I definitely
mm,
didn't want to be taking on other people's troubles. And then I
mhm,
came to this kind of unique pocket of learning about intuition. And this isn't about your troubles, it's about listening to your truth
mm,
and about what is right for you. And your intuition, your inner voice loves you no matter
mhm.
what. And it's just the source of pure love and wisdom and calm. And then when I figured out, oh, I can help people access that, then
Yeah.
my
And
ideal
not take
client,
on their trauma and
yeah, my ideal client and the client I work with every day is the people's inner voice. They're loving best parts of them and then helping them have that relationship with their loving
Mm.
best parts of them. And honestly, working myself out of a job sometimes. I've had clients that have worked with me for a long time who then don't need me anymore. And that is such a cause for celebration.
Yes.
So that's a little bit about, what I'm up to these days and how I got here.
I love so much about this. And like, yes, I I feel this is often like not talked about much because we talk often in like the online business world of like continuous like client journeys and like return per client and so on and so forth, which is all great. But at the end of like when you're actually graduating from my services, hell
Mm-hmm.
yes, like that's
Mm-hmm.
amazing. And
Mm-hmm.
that was also a part of that's how I'm wired. And that's also like I was such a bad employee. Like I would always like get myself like ridden out of things because I came in, like cleaned everything up, was like, okay, now I'm not needed anymore. So goodbye.
Yeah.
Yeah, which makes no sense if you're employed,
And
but
it's tricky. I mean, I do believe deeply that we all need help and support and guidance. And
yes,
so, any of my clients that have moved beyond needing me on a day-to-day basis, I still am all doors always open
yes,
for a tune-up, a check-in, whatever,
yes,
because sometimes we can go seasons and years feeling really
yeah.
dialed in and connected to ourselves, and then happens. It always does. And we can lose our way or feel like we're off track. And really, we're never as far off track as we think we are. We're like just a little
Mm.
bit off, and to use the name of your podcast, sometimes you're just taking the scenic route. It isn't actually off track at all. And so it's
Mm-mm.
about listening inward and finding out, okay, I am where I am. Now what? And that's, I think, a lot of the women I work with have gotten to a point in life where they've checked a lot of the boxes or discovered those boxes aren't for them. And they
Mm-hmm.
feel really good and at peace with that. But then still they're wondering what's next. And I've
Yeah.
got, 30 more years of doing whatever, 40, 50 into like what's now.
Mm-hmm.
And having a connection to yourself and your inner voice is really helpful when you're ready to pave your own path and do what feels good and right for you, and as opposed to following everybody else's, pathway.
Yeah. Agreed. And it kind of it makes me I want to circle back to something in your introduction, but this is calling me more right now. You said like when you're never really that far off, but in the moment you feel, at least when I've experienced this, it feels like you're miles and miles and miles. You have an entire ocean between it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it almost feels like you you kind of intellectually you can trust your intuition, but it's kind of like you stopped along the way, you stop trusting yourself, so you won't really take your inner voice, your intuition fully into account because you stop trusting yourself. You kind of stop having your own back, which is not a conscious decision by any means. It just kind of like happened. So how, if we're in the middle of that and we feel it's actually like there's an ocean gigantic divide, how can we, before we hear our wisdom again, how can we learn to trust ourselves again?
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, I can feel it as you're talking about it. I can feel those feelings that I've had where it feels like there's, an ocean apart. And one of the things that makes that pain so acute is feeling like it's permanent. And I know in my experience as a mother, the most miserable moments in pregnancy, in birth, in taking a kid to school, whatever the case may be, the most painful moments are when in your there's a voice inside of you telling you that it's going to be like this way forever. Or
Mm-hmm.
if, my son is not being kind to his siblings, then that he's going to be a bully when he's 18 and,
Mm-hmm.
run off the rails. And it like the spiral occurs.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels like not only are you off track and the ocean is spanning in front of you, but
Mm-hmm.
also that it's going to be like that
Yeah, the
forever.
track is set
And
and it's
it's
going to doomhood. It's
irreparable
Mhm.
damage. Like it's permanent. And we
Mhm.
also do know when we're not in that moment that nothing is permanent, and nothing being permanent is something we also fear and can also create this like spiral of like, I want it to be like this forever. It's never going to change. It's this like tension point that does make it really difficult to hear your inner voice and to trust what you receive. So if you're
Mhm.
in one of those super painful moments, or if your kid is having a tantrum and you're having to slam them into the car seat or whatever it is, or client is being extremely difficult, and it just being compassionate with yourself and with whoever you're interacting with, and knowing that everything has momentum, things will always move,
Mhm.
seasons change, the sun's going to rise, all that stuff is really true. And sometimes the greatest gift that we can give ourselves and give the moment is patience and breathing. And
Mhm.
by being patient, by breathing, by knowing that most of the time it's not like a life or death situation in these moments, that you don't actually have to make a decision. You don't actually have to take action, nor do you necessarily want to when you're in that crisis moment, big or little. Being fair with yourself on that and knowing, like, okay, this is terrible. It's
Mhm.
not going to be terrible forever. That can be really, really helpful, because I think there is this, like, as we're sitting here calm talking, there is this kind of desire of like, yeah, but when I really needed my intuition, I couldn't get to it. And
Mhm.
I think that realistically, if you could hear your intuition in those really tough moments, it would just say, breathe and feel this,
Yeah.
and you're gonna
Like
be
guide you
okay.
out of like that
Yeah,
really high pressure situation.
guiding you through it. Yeah,
Mhm.
not necessarily taking you out of it, because out of
Yeah.
it makes it sound like backwards or
Yeah,
around
that
the
is true.
corner,
True is
but
a
going
much better
through
wording.
it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And there's this concept that many teachers have, spoken to and talked around. Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body. Bella Lively calls it emotional beanbags, which is a term she came up with. But everybody has these different ways of describing the emotions that live within our body. And it's not
Mhm.
part of the physical body, but in the emotional body. And those emotions, if they are not felt, if they are not expressed and experienced through therapy, somatic therapy, yoga, breathing, whatever, running, I don't care what. If they're not experienced and moved
Mhm.
through, it will always be hard to hear your intuition. It will always be hard to trust. You
Yeah.
may hear it, you probably will hear it. And then you'll say, yeah, but that doesn't apply to me. Or, yeah, but
Yeah,
I
your
know better.
logic brain kind
Hmm.
of like cuts you out and be like, no, mm-mm.
Because your logic brain is afraid of feeling that feeling and wants to protect you from that feeling. And that's an honorable effort. But we
Yes,
all
it
know,
is.
if you, and we're not always ready to feel all the feelings, right? That's part of life, is we have our whole life to flow
Mhm.
through all of this. So I don't ascribe to the belief that you have to go hunting for these things. But when it's safe and ready to be released, if you can work with somebody like me or whoever in your life that can support you
Mhm.
in flowing through and feeling those emotional beanbags to their extinction, like feeling them to completion, then that topic, that subject, whatever, you can actually trust your inner voice on, because the emotional charge is no longer there.
Yeah, that's such an important point. Like you trust yourself that whenever whatever kind of somatic experience, beanbag or pain body is rising up, this is the one to look at in the situation, right? Not go hunting or whatever.
Mhm.
And I know I mean, we always like, I mean, if you're in the self growth and sphere, it's not, you're not supposed to like brush your emotions under the carpet because they'll stay there. They're not gone. They're still there. But you can brush them, like you can just acknowledge them under the carpet, knowing that they'll still be there years from now. And maybe, and you have to be really honest with yourself if you're like avoiding, or if you're like, I am not ready yet.
Yeah.
And that's
And that's
okay.
again, that's trusting yourself, right? That's knowing. And also, even more importantly, when you come to the point where you're like, oh, okay, this is an interesting practice. This is something I'm going to start paying attention to now that I'm 38 years old and ready to kind of handle some of these things, to not beat yourself up for not doing it earlier, to
Oh,
not giving yourself
yes.
grief on like, oh, well,
Yes.
I should have handled this before. No,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
and oh, the other thing that happens so often is that like you're like, I thought I already dealt with this. I thought I already handled this. Why is it coming back
Mm-hmm.
up? And it's coming back up because now you're at this different place with different
Mm-hmm.
tools, different resources and knowledge, and there's more to grow through. There's more to learn.
Yeah.
And so I think the beating yourself up and giving yourself grief and feeling guilt and all of that is a thing to release in itself, because it's
Mm.
just going to get in the way of really having that connected trust with yourself.
Yeah. Where do you think, I have a theory. Where do you think that beating yourself up? I think we both agree that it's happening fairly often. I see it in my clients too. Like, oh, why haven't I like started working on my brand like years ago? Why haven't I been on Instagram like a gazillion different ways? Why do you think that this is showing up so much?
There just really isn't much of an appreciation or importance placed on accepting where you are and being satisfied with where you are.
Yes.
You know, who's gonna, there's no, that's not a very sexy topic. And who's gonna go around marketing like, oh, be happy with where you are in life? Like, nobody's gonna sell anything saying that. And so there's just
Yeah.
from, and I don't think marketing is evil. I think marketing is most of the time genius, but a lot of times it's going to make you feel
Yeah.
like you're not enough, like you're not doing
Yes.
enough. And there's, even if you are not part of hustle culture, even if you've like pushed that aside, you are still part of culture.
You're still
Like you still,
human.
you
It's
live on this
there's no
planet.
escape. Like
Yeah.
we are in unfair, deeply capitalistic systems. Like, yeah, there's no way around it unless you, I don't know, completely isolate yourself in the woods. Then maybe.
Right. And even then, I guess you probably might not be satisfied with all of the, provisions that you've
Mhm.
curated for yourself, because now you're living in the woods by yourself and you don't know how long your food's going to last. So, like on a deep innate level, there is something inside of us humans that makes us want more and makes us want to do more. But speaking from, immense privilege, if you are not in a situation where your like core needs are at risk, then developing some sort of practice in gratitude or appreciation, finding a way to
Yeah.
be satisfied with what is,
Yeah.
that can really help soothe some of this. And I think one of our jobs in personal development, self-growth, whatever you want to call it, is to soothe the part of us that is like gripping for more, and telling that piece of Kaileen like, hey, like, have you looked around a lot lately? Because, like, you're good. It's
Hmm.
okay. And can you just appreciate what you have? And when you have that kind of conversation with yourself, then I think it is easier to not beat yourself up for not doing things, because you're like, wow, yeah, I have like a pretty good life right now. Not everything's perfect, but
Hmm.
on the whole, it's okay. And that's
Yeah.
really, a nice feeling.
Yeah. I like the media messaging around that is so true. It's always from a lack of, and you're lacking and it's your fault and you got to do better. Whether you got to work harder for your health, you for your business success, for whatever. And being, yeah, and you're right, Like telling people to be satisfied is not gonna, it's probably not gonna
Yeah,
sell
because like
much.
what's a synonym for satisfaction that like would be negative? Be like complacent. Nobody wants to be
Oh
complacent. And
no.
it's like
Oof.
essentially could look
Yeah.
the same
Or
on paper.
comfort. Like
Oh,
comfort
yeah.
zone. I really hate that this word has such a bad rep because
I know.
I like comfort. Like who doesn't? I mean, seriously. Like I like yes, there is a time to go hard and push yourself, but dear, comfort is amazing. I don't know.
Yes. Yes. And
At
I
this age,
I
I'm
would
like comfort.
yes, and I would argue that most people are uncomfortable with being comfortable and that you could push yourself to be more comfortable most of the time. And then, of course, you're totally right. It's a fine line. And again, that's where intuition and knowing yourself and trusting yourself can
Mm-hmm.
really support you because we are also growth seeking beings and we're on this earth to evolve and grow. And so that's going to happen naturally and in so much more alignment with your true
Yeah.
self in a way that is truly satisfying when you have a conversation with your intuition. Because what happens a lot is that you can hustle and grind and do all the things and manifest and get all the stuff that whatever, get the job, get the family, get all the stuff. You're like, okay, cool, I did it. And I don't feel exactly like what I thought I was going to feel like. I got to my goal and I'm not happy. And it's
Yes.
because it was not in alignment with you to begin with, or
Yeah.
along the way, you were really pushing yourself in areas that maybe you didn't need to. And I have experienced that many times in my life where I've gotten to the mountaintop and I was like, wait, this isn't, I don't know. Why was I working so hard
Yeah.
for this when it doesn't taste like how I thought it was going to taste?
Yeah. And I mean, in my case, I was on top of the mountain. I put my flag up on the top and I was like, I am on the brink of total exhaustion.
Hmm.
I did not enjoy the journey at all. Like I
Hmm.
probably have to like take a time out for 6 months now. So what?
Hmm.
Like, no, this cannot be it. And then like enter burnout. And that's
Exactly.
another
And the
interesting, sorry.
sometimes the view it yeah, but sometimes the
Mm,
view is worth it. So again, to not beat yourself up for like, okay, yeah, you did
yeah,
do that. And there is a wonderful thing about being able to put your stake in the ground, look around and need a
yeah,
nap for 6 months. That's a lesson, a
yeah.
really important lesson to learn.
And it's also nice to know that you and your body are physically capable of doing things. I mean, there's always something to learn from. But you brushed on that. It's a lot of us, we do things, and that goes for whatever we're doing here, self-growth, spiritual development, and so on. It goes for that too. We do things because we kind of have the expectations when we do that, then. So
Hmm.
if I release all my bean bags, then I'm feeling
Hmm.
happy or whatever. And it's like, mm-mm, it's not actually working like that. Like, and the same like it goes for, oh, if I'm gonna do that if I've lost that weight, the baby weight, or if I've done that. And like you'll be still pretty fucking miserable even when you lost 20 pounds. Like that's not gonna magically turn on the happy switch.
Yeah. 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 And it's not to say that there I think there's also this like big premium on happy. There's like this really big, like that's the end destination. And it's,
Mm.
that's why I think satisfaction and fulfillment and these kind of more subtle energies are something I aspire towards and that I align with because you can be satisfied in a moment and then you can be really freaking irritated at your kids in the next and you're still
Mm-hmm.
human. It's okay. I
Yes.
don't think that we're trying to avoid emotion. If anything, I'm at a point in my life where I'm really trying to allow my emotions, model my
Mm-hmm.
emotions and not beat myself up for having them, but also, learning how to modulate them in a way that's healthy and good for me and for those around me.
Yes, which kind of goes into another really interesting concept of, let's put it like bluntly like this. Women are allowed to have some emotions, and we're not allowed to have others. And there are a whole many spaces who tell us kind of like, oh no, like when you're very vocal about something, it's like, oh, she's like, you already get like a lot of bad, like, I don't know, bad connotations thrown at you. And it's really, I like what you said and resonates so strongly with me. I'm like the point where like, no, I allow my emotions to take up space, and it's okay. And yes, I might not always express them retrospectively the way I kind of thought maybe would have been, I don't know, more appropriate almost, or,
Yeah.
but I mean, then again, I'm still learning, right? Like, I mean, I'm coming from someone who had almost no, I don't know, I had barely any, let's call it, emotional education growing up. And I think that resonates with a lot of us who have boomer parents. That wasn't something, emotions wasn't something we, I don't know, would have been articulated or talked about often. So sometimes I feel like my 3.5-year-old is like more emotionally mature than I am.
Yeah, it's very possible that that's true.
Yes,
And
yes.
how that's a very difficult spot to be in, to be learning on the fly
Mm-hmm.
when a 3.5-year-old has quite the expressions of emotion. And though they can be very overwhelming. I mean, we had in my household today so many emotions between my three children. Just before 10 a.m., I hadn't even had my second cup of coffee, and there was and so if you personally don't have a relationship with emotions that feel safe and good and true, then how can you feel when others are
Yeah.
emoting in their own right? It's very difficult. I would say my relationship with emotions growing up was um different than what it sounds like yours were, in that there was a lot of yelling in my house, a lot of yelling. And so things were expressed, but they were just not necessarily expressed in a safe way.
Okay.
And so for me, learning in my journey, I always just default to yelling because that was what was
Mm-hmm.
modeled to me. And then there's this huge, dissonance between like how I really feel and then how I'm expressing, and then this like guilt afterwards. And so flowing through that and learning for me that, okay, well, I, tend to
Mm-hmm.
yell. I would like to have a quieter, less scary voice with my children when it's not necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been gifted these kids where my daughter will say, Mama, it scares me when you talk with that
Mm-hmm.
voice. And she says it
Yeah.
so calmly that I'm like, okay, well, I just wanted you to know that I'm serious, but next time I will try to use a softer voice.
But yeah, that's so great, right? About young kids. They're really, I mean, they learn by you doing but what you do and not what you say. And at the
Mhm.
same time, they're mirroring back at you. And for me, and that goes back to what you initially said, in your like, that you um grew to be a different mother than you would expected you to be. Um, like, how, I'm curious, how, what kind of mom did you think you would be prior to having kids?
Well, I was the oldest grandchild out of both sides of my families, and I always loved being around babies. From early as I can remember, I wanted to be a mom, and specifically a stay-at-home mom. And I always said I wanted to have four kids. I have three. I'm not so sure. I still want four. And I babysat. I taught swim lessons. I got my degree in elementary education. I've always
Mm-hmm.
loved children. And then when I had my own, I loved them, of course, but they were much less, hmm, exciting to me in a way that other
Mm-hmm.
people's children were when I didn't have kids, and a lot more exhausting. And
Yeah,
I learned about
there's
human design in motherhood as I became a mom. And I'm a projector, which, if you are unfamiliar with human design, you can look it up. I have a blog post about it. But projectors don't have a consistent source of
no,
energy,
we need rest.
and we need rest. And we also tend to be high achieving overperformers who don't know how to rest. And so
Yeah, this is like this should be in my new Instagram bio. This is the nutshell. Yes, yes, I agree.
And for me, what that meant is that I would do these big bursts of energy where I'd like clean the house and do the things and, have dinner ready. And then like 3 days would pass and I would have no energy to do anything household related. And I would just have these ups and downs where I felt like, gosh, like I imagined that I would do all of the things all the time and I would be delighted by all of it and be so joyful and just like, you know, feel the way I felt when I was teaching in a kindergarten classroom, that I would feel that way about my own children. And it's so different. It's so, so different. And so for
Mm-hmm.
me, I learned how to be the kind of mom that's really okay with sitting and chilling and watching my kids play and like setting things up for them, but then walking away. And I am not the make believe, pretend play parent in this house. I like to kind of like set things up for them
Mm-hmm.
and let them come upon them,
Yeah.
and then just kind of like sprinkle in. And I also had this big realization when my first was born that I didn't feel like a gentle person. I didn't know that
Oh.
I even
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be a gentle person. I didn't feel calm. I didn't feel gentle. And then I had this tiny little critter who was so soft and snuggly. And I just wanted to be soft and snuggly for him in a way that I was always just very like type A, go, go, go. And I never identified with being gentle, to where like even like putting on lotion on my face, like I was like, gosh, I'm really rough with myself, like I want to be softer and
Mm-hmm.
gentler. And so that was, a big, I didn't, again, like it wasn't until I became a mom that some of these things I wanted got on the table for me wanting them, and then other things I was like, oh, never mind, like I hate doing crafts. I do not want to craft with my children ever. I do not enjoy it. We are fortunate enough that we have a full-time nanny, and crafting is one of her greatest strengths. And
Oh, bless her.
if she ever has kids someday, I do believe that she will still enjoy crafts. I am not that, and she loves to cook with the kids. Another thing that I like to cook, but I like my kitchen a certain way. And if you're cracking eggs with a 2-year-old, you deserve a medal. Like I cannot do that.
Any cooking at all or any crafting at all with a 2-year-old, with like 2 to 4-year-old is like
Uh-uh.
yeah.
I may be the kind of grandma that I thought the kind of mom, but it's going to take me decades and a lot of sleep to
But
get to the
again, like
point.
you're like you most likely will be that grandma, right? Because the grandma, you
Yeah.
again, is the cool part where you take the kids for
Mm-hmm.
a day or two and then you're like,
Mm-hmm.
bye bye, see you
Yeah.
later. Like
Yeah.
I have me time now. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
when you're a new mom, me
I
time
know.
was not really a concept that ooh. And it really, for me, like, and I want to talk about this in the second part of our conversation, because that's initially how the premise I kind of invited you in on the Scenic Route podcast, because you shared an Instagram post, I think it was at the time, about mothering yourself. And I was like, ooh, that resonates deeply. And that's something I've realized with when my son was born, and then like now teaching him through like through emotions and all those things and the early years. I'm like, I have no recollection at all of a lot of these things I am modeling for my son. And I'm like, huh. And I started like, I mean, I've always done work. I've always been like I did somatic experience also before, but I kind of really went on a deep dive, and I brought up a lot of really not so pleasant beanbags. And one of that was also like, I don't know what is called in literature, what is often referred to as a mother wound. And it was really like, oh, yes, it really resonated with, I kind of like have to learn how to mother myself. Like I'm learning what mothering means through my son, but I've never like experienced it per se. Like my parents were great providers, but they were not carers. So I'm like, what does like how do I start mothering myself? Where do we even begin?
Yeah. I think you begin when you realize that that's something that you want to do. And
Mm,
then you get to look at where in your life are you not getting the love, the compassion, the support that you maybe had imagined at some point you would be receiving from your mom. And even in the point I just mentioned about wanting to be more gentle with
mm-hmm,
myself, it is giving yourself permission to put on lotion in a softer, gentler way when you have the thought, I want to be more gentle. I think there's a lot of even just that tiny thing of thinking to yourself, I want XYZ, and then not giving yourself permission to do that for
mm-hmm,
yourself, thinking you don't have time or whatever, or even just it occurring to you that you can,
mm-hmm.
like that is something
Or
that
just actually noticing that you're slapping on the lotion instead
yeah,
of like gently
yeah,
caressing your
yeah.
face.
Yeah. And maybe when I was a child, maybe people were slapping lotion onto me. Do you know how hard it is to lotion a child? They're moving all about, crazy little animals. So like so it's a bad analogy, but it's a good analogy. I have
Mm,
3 kids. Only one of them likes it when I put lotion on. The other two,
mm.
I'm probably more rough than I need to be
The
because I just want to
sunscreen
get the job
battle
done.
is the battle of every
Oh,
summer. It's like I don't know.
yeah. So it's really hard, I think, to be a parent. And there really isn't, there kind of is now that conversation and dialogue on, oh, this is difficult, but really there hasn't been a lot of change to support mothers
Yes.
specifically. And that's on a policy, societal level that I don't have the bandwidth to take on at this exact moment. But I think it's important to acknowledge
Yes.
the soup that you're swimming in. And
Oh,
then
yes.
right, and then to look at, well, how can I give myself that love, and how can I give myself that support, and what would that look like, and knowing that the lineage of mothers that you come from can sometimes be really helpful. I mean, when I look back down the line, there really just wasn't very much mental health or support,
Mm-hmm.
or people had children quite young in my family, so they didn't have a lot of money and they didn't have a lot of education, and
Mm-hmm.
they had some mental health problems. You combine that for a few generations stacking backwards, it makes a lot of sense
Mm-hmm.
why I grew up the way that I did, which isn't how I necessarily want my children to grow up, but I'm learning. And even that is an act of self mothering, because
Mm-hmm.
if you can get that amount of space to say, okay, I want to do it differently. And how does that look? And not beat yourself up when you yell at your kids, but
Mm-hmm.
live with compassion in yourself that, like, okay, that was my default response. I do not want to do that again. And being kind, and then giving yourself that, the kindness, the compassion, the
Yeah.
self care, whatever it is, giving that to yourself. That's what self mothering is. And I would venture to say that people who have amazing relationships with their mothers probably also need a dose of self mothering, because we're always going to want certain things from other people that
Mm-hmm.
really we can only truly give to ourselves.
Yeah. Or we have to give it ourselves first,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think there is a interdependency to that. Yeah, and also it's there's a lot of making peace and being at peace with that, you like from your mother or from any relationship, that you will not, you most likely will never get what you were hoping to get.
Yeah, and there's this responsibility and maybe pressure that can come with recognizing that if anybody's going to give it to you, it's got to be you. Then it's like, oh my gosh, I have so much on my to-do list. I like really don't have time for more to do more. And now I got to do it for myself. And so there's this paradigm shift that occurs where you start to see that the oxygen mask thing isn't a fallacy. That is really true. If you've
Yes.
passed out, you cannot put an oxygen mask on your child.
Nope.
And it is a much longer path. And you really have to have a vision for yourself in your 70s and 80s and look at her and say, okay, I'm taking care now so that I can be the vibrant, youthful, appreciative you, healthy, safe you that I want to be when I'm 70. Because we all know people who in their 70s and 80s that don't have their stuff together and wish they had sooner. Yeah. So it's like, saving for your retirement when you're in your 20s, that's when you should be saving because it's going to exponentially compound.
Yeah.
But
Which
you
is
don't
not
think
sexy when you're in your 20s.
Exactly. And then you hit your 40s and you're like, oh my God, I wish I had been saving. And so the same thing applies. And so to not put extra pressure on yourself, but to know that little, tiny, small acts compound in the same way that if you had put a few dollars in your 20s, it would compound. The same thing applies, that if you start to listen to your intuition, create that relationship now, just think about how strong that connection will be in 15 years, in 20 years. If you start to take care of your basic needs and really support your own personal nourishment, not what, the experts are telling you or whatever, but really listening to what does my body want and need, and developing that connection now over time and being patient with it, with your body, with yourself, making space for you, however big or small that space is, right? Like it could literally be clearing out a drawer or a little tiny corner of a cabinet and like cultivating some tiny space that brings you joy. For me, it's my closet. It's the only room in my house that is just closet, mine. Though. It is gorgeous, but I've really made an effort to make it gorgeous. It has been a huge effort of mine for 7 years to make this space mine. And I'm kind of ruthless about it. Like that, I'm not going to. Do you know where all the extra stuff in our house gets stored? In my husband's closet, not in mine, because I'm not going to share my space.
This is a zen space. I'm like, no.
I'm like, I gotta. And to be fair, there's a dirty laundry basket right here that I'm staring at. So it's not perfect. And that's the other thing. We're not striving for perfection.
Yes, yeah. We're not looking for perfect. So I'm like, let's kind of like, I want to circle back on what you said about stacking tiny little habits on top of each other, right? Because yes, that goes for money, that goes for habits, like Atomic Habits basically is the book if you want to know more about that. So can we say, and that word also has a bad rep, but maybe when we call it like, so let's say cultivating a sort of gentle approach to discipline is also a way of mothering ourselves?
If that's what you need, right? Like it's really a soup that you are making to your own specific tastes. And so there are some people who really actually don't need discipline. They need the allowance and the permission to not manage their schedule and their calendar. That's me. Like I was always calendaring, so many hours and time spent managing a calendar. And the more radical, more truthful approach for me is not putting everything on my schedule, I don't keep a paper calendar anymore after 30 years of having a paper calendar.
I love this for you.
Yeah. So discipline for some, right? And having rituals and rhythms for yourself is really important, I believe, because those rituals are something that are going to anchor and ground you to who you
Yeah.
are and bring you back to what's important. Have soothing, calming,
Mm-hmm.
tactile strategies that are going to help you feel good. And rhythms are something that are going to ebb and flow and change based on what season it is in
Mm-hmm.
life and in nature. Like my discipline, in your words, my discipline for summer is going to be very different than fall because my kids are out of school in the summer. So there's a lot more chaos and a lot less quiet for me to do my client sessions and my podcast. Like I work out of my house. So there's all these people in my house. I'm not going to have that. So rhythms are something that you can come back to, when it's nice and warm outside, going for a morning walk. When it's snowy and cold outside, morning walks aren't going to serve you. Well, maybe for some, but that's not going to serve me. So then it's, finding a gentle yoga practice or going to a Pilates class and allowing myself to shift and change in what feels good now and not anchoring myself to, well, I was 20 pounds lighter when I was going to Pilates every day. Like that is, that's a tendency that most of us have. It's like, okay, well, how do I get back to where I was? And what was I doing to do that? And again, your mind is going to have a billion ideas. But if you exhale, 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 and really listen to your intuition, it's going to be simple and straightforward. Your intuition is going to tell you, drink more water, like go to bed. It might say something you weren't expecting
or
about.
Try different exercise that you've never really thought about. And you're like, oh, wait, where did
or
that
it's
come
gonna
from?
give you somebody's name and that's your friend and your friend has this other thing. And so you go do walks around the lake with them, so it's gonna guide you in ways that your mind isn't gonna tell you what to do. But if you've been living from your mind for however long you've been living, like it's okay to experiment and try another resource of wisdom inside of you.
Yeah. Yes. And I see that discipline is not really the right word, but I don't know, when you hear your intuition and it tells you something to maybe go for that lake walk, and you hear it, but you have to turn that into, I don't know, aligned action, right? Just thinking of it is not enough. Just manifesting about it is not enough. You need action. And I see this with my clients, but also in myself more than I'd like to admit. But whenever we try something new, it feels uncomfortable as fudge. Our body does not want to do this. Whether it's like a new exercise or a new diet, whatever. New, uncomfortable. Even if it's better for you when you're 70, the uncomfortableness in the right now stops a lot of people from doing it again and again and again. So maybe one way of moving through that is actually being like okay with the uncomfortableness. Like, yes, it's supposed to feel uncomfortable because you're doing something new. Or how you're looking at that.
Yeah. So one thing is if you have young children or if you have access to one and you look at what they do.
You can borrow mine.
You can look at what they do. Yeah. They fall and they get back up. They, they explore and they experiment, but they also don't have these like lofty expectations of performance, of results. They do things until
and they have no stories of that success in their heads.
Right. They're experimenting, they're playing, they do something until it feels good or until their interest gets turned somewhere else. And then they move
usually
on
after
to something
7
else.
minutes of any
and
activity.
They're totally fine. Yeah. And they're totally fine with it. So I think there's there's something to be said for being radically honest with yourself on where you are finding joy and delight, and
Hmm.
what would happen if you gave yourself permission to prioritize that, to really truly let yourself dwell in the beauty of the leaves blowing in the trees outside and stay there for a while. And then when you get your stomach grumbles, like, I forgot, it's time to eat, and really just kind of tuning in more to yourself. Now, again, if you have all of these emotions and stories and beanbags piled up, it's going to be really hard to trust
Hmm.
that joy and delight are your greatest teachers, because you've been told and you believe that, discipline and action are the
And
ways to
pain
get
and
what
just,
you want. Yeah. So it's really helpful to experiment in areas of your life where things do feel more intuitive and more
hmm.
flowy and easy. So if that's in your work, then experiment with handing the reins over to your intuition in work, places where you feel safe and okay and
Hmm.
successful already. That's going to be a good place to develop that trust. But uh, the tool I've been playing with more is honesty, because if I'm
Mm.
truly honest with myself about what my intuition's telling me,
Hmm.
I don't have to listen to it. I don't have to listen to my mind. I don't have to listen to my intuition. But being honest about really where that information is coming from and
Yeah.
trusting that I know it. Because so often when people get into this work, the first thing they went, well, how do I know for sure that it's my intuition? Or how do I know it's not my mind pretending to be my
Ooh.
intuition? Oh my gosh. I've gotten that question so
This is
many
like
times. And
very
it's like,
meta. Okay, yeah.
your mind is asking that question. Your mind is asking, is my mind pretending to be my intuition? So you gotta be honest with yourself about this. And it's a little bit of a trust fall. I don't know. Let's just see. It
Hmm.
doesn't actually matter where it's coming from. If it feels good and true and right for you, it's gonna be okay. So the honesty is a key piece. And then the other thing is the element of experience and experimenting. So just
Yes.
let's see, for you, if you were like, okay, I'm embarking on this new exercise or this new diet thing, and it's so uncomfortable and I hate it, but I also know it's going to delight me when I'm 70, and so I'm willing to be miserable. The thing that's soothing to the mind is to say, well, let's just see what happens
Yeah.
in 30 days. Let me just 10 days, or I'll try it for, that whole thing about like, oh, well, just take yourself on a 10-minute walk,
Yeah. And
and
see how
before
you
you know it,
feel.
you'll be walking for 60. And it's like, we do sometimes have to give our mind a carrot, and that's like supporting it and soothing it, just like you would a child. That's self-mothering, is being like,
Hmm.
okay, yeah, you're not in the mood for a walk. I see that. That's, Netflix is really compelling because they just keep playing shows over and over again, which makes you feel like you shouldn't get off the couch. But I have a really good podcast for you to listen to. Come on. And being like gentle and cute and sweet with yourself
Mm.
can go a long way.
Yeah. That is so true. And yeah, and really be like, hey, how can I, yeah, really next time you're like, oh, okay, I really do not want to do this thing, whatever it is, your new exercise, your tax returns, whatever,
Yeah.
try go at it from an angle of mothering yourself. Like, what
Yes.
would you say to your
Yes.
child, to your inner child, right?
And
Like,
like not and don't do it. Don't do the action when you're in a miserable mood. Do
yeah,
not do that. Is not the time to do it. But can you gently nudge and guide and mother and curate an experience for yourself? You're like, oh, look, I made you some tea. I'm burning your favorite candle. Come on, you can do it. And like, do that. It's like so fun to play with and that's what our children are doing when they're playing.
yeah,
They're like, ooh, look, I can stand on this and jump. That's so cool. That's so cool and
yeah,
entertaining. And they're in that mode of being their best playmate. And you can be your best playmate still. You're just a little out of practice. But again, you're not too far off the path. You do it a few times and you're like, oh, wow, I really like it when I make myself a bath with bath salts. That's delightful. And then, self care becomes something that isn't what you're doing out of objection because
yeah.
you're supposed to take care of yourself, but it's because it actually gives you delight.
Yes. And please use the good bath salt, the one that you
Yeah.
stored away for like special occasions. Use
Yeah.
it.
Because if you
Use
don't,
it
they're just
now.
gathering dust anyway. Use them. Yeah.
Oh God, like I think the time just kind of flew by. I want to let everyone know who's listening that if they're like, I want to work more with my intuition. I'm curious now. You got something for us that is kind of like a super introduction to kind of like listen to your intuition and live in alignment with your inner wisdom. Do you want to tell us quickly more about it?
Yeah, so I have a free program called 21 Days to Intuition, and it's a 3 week experience where every day you have a prompt from me that helps you guide yourself to listening to your intuition on little everyday moments. So some of them are like letting your intuition take you for a walk or a drive to work, or having your intuition pick out what you wear today. And so every day for 3 weeks, you're just developing a deeper connection to your intuition. And there's journal prompts and lots of support along the way to encourage you. I actually like read the responses to the journal prompts and respond to them. So I am on the other side cheering you on and answering your questions. And so that's always a really great place to start, or a great place to reconnect and reignite that connection if it feels like it's been a while since you've listened, but you know you have an intuition.
Mhm.
I have clients that do it every year because they just love not having to think of what to ask their intuition about, but just to
Mm.
be able to connect on a
Connect
different
into the
topic every
stream.
day. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I done it myself. It's really delightful. I was really
Thank you.
enjoying it. So yeah, please, if you've liked Colleen's approach, go sign up for her 21 days of intuition. You will not regret
Yes.
it.
It's at kayleenelise.com, and I know you'll link to it in the show
We will
notes,
link it in
but
show
yeah.
notes. And also, you hang out most on Instagram, I think.
That's my main place to play. Yeah, I also have a newsletter, and I have a membership that people can join if they want more deep one-on-one coaching with me for a full year. That's called the Season Sessions. And I love connecting on Instagram. I've been on Instagram for so long, so
Since
many
since like
years.
since the early days where people had all
Over
the
a
same
decade.
weird
Oh,
filters, like the
yes.
one that turned everything
Yes.
dark. It was
Yes.
we took
It was a
pictures of
different
our
place.
food. Yeah, we were
Mhm.
so carefree. We took pictures of our food and our outfits, and it was just bliss.
It was. It was. And think, what we're talking about today, like we'll be saying that, oh, podcasting was it was just we were just sitting in our closet
Yeah, yeah.
talking, so things change, but yeah, this has just been so delightful. I really appreciate you, and I'm excited to connect with your community and hopefully see a few people in 21 Days to Intuition.
Yay. Thank you so much for spending the time with me on the Scenic Route podcast, Kaileen. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you.